She was the epitome of justice, an Alabama judge, respected for her sharp legal mind and unwavering adherence to the law. But behind the gavel and the robes, Karen Hill harbored a sinister secret. A secret so dark it would shock her courtroom, her community, and the nation. On the surface, her life was a portrait of success, a respected career, a picture-perfect home, and a seemingly stable marriage. But what unfolded in the shadows told a very different story. A story of betrayal, calculated deception, and a chilling plot to hire a hitman to kill her own husband. How does a woman sworn to uphold justice cross the line into orchestrating murder? What pushed her to risk everything? Her career, her freedom, her very soul? And how did she believe she could escape unscathed? Before we dive into this tale of betrayal, make sure to subscribe to Horror and Crime. Like this video, share it with others who love true crime, and turn on notifications to stay updated with more gripping stories like this one. Your support helps us uncover the darkest secrets and bring them to light. Tonight, we take you inside the tangled web of lies, greed, and desperation that led to the unraveling of Judge Karen Hill. From the initial whispers of suspicion to the explosive investigation, this is a case that redefines the boundaries of justice and corruption. Stay with us as we uncover the layers of this chilling real-life crime. Because in the end, the one person no one ever suspected turned out to be the mastermind. Karen Hill was no stranger to the law. As a presiding judge in a small Alabama county, her reputation for delivering swift, decisive judgments preceded her. In her courtroom, she commanded respect, and her fierce intellect left little room for doubt. To those around her, she was the embodiment of authority, a woman who lived and breathed justice. But beyond the courtroom, her life told a more complex story. Karen's marriage to Richard Hill, a local contractor, appeared idyllic to the outside world. They were the kind of couple people admired, two pillars of the community. Yet, friends and colleagues later recalled subtle cracks in the facade. A tense smile here, a sharp word there, small signs that hinted at trouble beneath the surface. Richard, described by those who knew him as affable and hardworking, spent much of his time managing his construction business. But as his career flourished, Karen's long hours in the courtroom left little room for family. The strain began to show in subtle ways. Whispered arguments behind closed doors, growing financial tensions, and allegations of infidelity that, though unconfirmed, swirled through their social circles. Those close to the Hills later recalled a brewing storm. Karen's sharp intellect and unyielding ambition were often at odds with Richard's more laid-back demeanor. Financial disagreements added fuel to the fire. But even as tensions mounted, no one could have foreseen the horrifying direction this marriage would take. Behind closed doors, Karen began to plot. What started as frustration and resentment quickly evolved into something far darker. The once respected judge, who had spent decades interpreting and upholding the law, was now contemplating breaking it in the most unimaginable way. Was it greed, anger, or something far more sinister that pushed her to the edge? Friends would later recall that Karen's behavior in the months leading up to the crime became erratic, withdrawn one moment, unusually short-tempered the next. Something had shifted, and while the surface of their lives remained picture-perfect to outsiders, the reality was a house of cards waiting to collapse. What no one knew was that Karen Hill had already begun taking the first steps toward a shocking betrayal that would forever tarnish her name. It was a stormy night in late October when Karen Hill's sinister plan began to take shape. In a chilling departure from her role as a defender of justice, she had allegedly hired a man to do the unthinkable: murder her husband. The man she turned to was no stranger to the underbelly of society, a hired gun with a reputation for discretion and ruthlessness. Months of resentment and meticulous planning had led to this moment. The hitman, known only as JD in court documents, was promised $15,000 to carry out the crime. Karen's instructions were precise. She wanted no loose ends, no trail that could lead back to her. Richard Hill was to be killed in their home, a place Karen believed would guarantee privacy and minimize suspicion. On the night of the planned attack, Richard was alone in the house. Karen, conveniently working late at the courthouse, had made sure her alibi was airtight. JD arrived under the cover of darkness, carrying out his grim task with chilling precision. Breaking in through a side door, he entered the bedroom where Richard slept. The attack was swift and brutal. Richard was struck multiple times with a blunt object before being shot, ensuring there would be no chance of survival. JD, confident in his execution, quickly fled the scene, leaving behind a bloodied and chaotic crime scene. But despite the meticulous planning, the crime was far from perfect. Unbeknownst to Karen and JD, a small yet critical detail would become their undoing. JD had unknowingly stepped in a puddle of rainwater before entering the house, leaving behind a trail of muddy footprints that led investigators directly to the truth. As news of Richard Hill's murder spread through the community, shock quickly gave way to suspicion. Who would want to harm a man like Richard, and why? What seemed like a tragic home invasion, at first glance, would soon unravel into a complex web of deceit. And the most shocking discovery was still to come. For amidst the chaos of the crime scene, investigators found an anonymous letter addressed to local police. Its contents would blow the case wide open and point directly to the one person no one thought capable of such betrayal. Karen Hill had always been the one asking the tough questions in her courtroom. Now, the town was about to ask one of her why. The investigation into Richard Hill's murder began with a flurry of activity. Local law enforcement, determined to solve the case quickly, combed through the chaotic crime scene for answers. At first, it appeared to be a straightforward home invasion gone wrong. But as detectives dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. The first breakthrough came almost immediately. The trail of muddy footprints leading from the side door to the bedroom suggested the intruder hadn't been as careful as intended. Forensic experts matched the prints to a specific type of work boot, one commonly used by construction workers. But who would leave such an obvious clue? Then came the anonymous letter, delivered to the local precinct just days after the murder. The note accused Karen Hill herself of orchestrating the crime. While the letter provided no direct proof, it raised eyebrows and redirected the focus of the investigation. Detectives began piecing together Karen's life outside the courtroom. A deep dive into her financial records revealed troubling details. Multiple unexplained withdrawals leading up to the murder, totaling exactly $15,000. Phone records painted an even darker picture, linking Karen to JD, a known criminal with a history of violent offenses. These records revealed dozens of late-night phone calls between Karen and JD in the weeks leading up to Richard's death. The content of these calls remained unknown, but their timing and frequency suggested more than coincidence. Investigators also discovered surveillance footage from a local diner, a grainy video showing Karen meeting with JD just days before the murder. When questioned, Karen denied any involvement. She claimed the withdrawals were for home repairs and dismissed her phone calls to JD as legal advice for a friend. But as evidence mounted, her explanations began to crumble under scrutiny. Detectives now had a suspect, but they needed more. The turning point came when investigators tracked down JD. During his initial interrogation, he maintained his innocence, but under pressure, his story began to shift. JD eventually confessed to the crime, pointing directly to Karen as the mastermind. He described their arrangement in chilling detail, recounting how she had promised him payment and provided instructions for the murder. With JD's confession, detectives had their smoking gun, but the case wasn't over. They needed hard evidence to tie Karen directly to the crime. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of a fingerprint found on the anonymous letter. Lab tests confirmed the print belonged to Karen, a mistake that sealed her fate. As news of Karen Hill's alleged involvement broke, the community was thrown into turmoil. How could a respected judge, a symbol of justice, be capable of such a heinous act? Friends, colleagues, and neighbors struggled to reconcile the Karen they knew with the accusations leveled against her. With Karen under arrest and the evidence mounting, the case was far from over. The courtroom, a place she once ruled with authority, was now where her fate would be decided, and the most shocking moments were still to come. The trial of Karen Hill was nothing short of a spectacle. Cameras lined the courthouse steps as spectators, reporters, and legal analysts gathered to witness what many called the trial of the decade. A judge who had once presided over high-profile cases was now sitting on the other side of the bench, facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree homicide. The prosecution built its case methodically, presenting a mountain of evidence that painted Karen as a cold, calculating orchestrator of her husband's murder. They introduced phone records, financial transactions, and surveillance footage showing her meetings with JD. But the most damning evidence was JD's testimony. Taking the stand, he detailed the chilling conversations he had with Karen, describing how she had planned every step of the crime. The defense, however, sought to poke holes in the prosecution's narrative. They argued that Karen had been framed, suggesting that JD, a known criminal, fabricated his testimony to secure a plea deal. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence directly tying Karen to the crime scene, emphasizing that JD's word alone could not be trusted. The trial was filled with dramatic moments. At one point, Karen's defense attorney grilled JD on the stand, attempting to unravel his credibility. In another, the prosecution displayed the anonymous letter and revealed the fingerprint analysis that tied it to Karen, delivering a crushing blow to the defense's case. The courtroom was tense as the jury deliberated. After 4 days, they returned with a verdict: guilty on all charges. Karen Hill, the once revered judge, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision was met with gasps and tears from both supporters and detractors alike. Karen's conviction sent shockwaves through the legal community. Judges, lawyers, and court staff who had worked alongside her grappled with the betrayal. Her case became a cautionary tale of how power and ambition, unchecked, can lead to devastating consequences. For many, the case raised broader questions. How could someone entrusted with upholding justice commit such a heinous crime? Were there warning signs that were ignored? And what does this mean for the integrity of the legal system? In the aftermath, Karen's family struggled to rebuild their lives. Richard's relatives mourned not only his loss, but the betrayal that compounded their grief. The community, too, wrestled with the scars left behind, as trust in its institutions was shaken. The story of Karen Hill is a chilling reminder of how ambition, resentment, and a lust for control can drive even the most trusted individuals to unthinkable acts. A woman once seen as the embodiment of justice became the very antithesis of what she stood for, a stark betrayal of the ideals she was sworn to uphold. Her case leaves us with difficult questions. How do we protect the systems of justice from those who would corrupt them? And can we ever truly know the depths of another person's secrets? While Karen Hill's story may be unique in its shocking details, it serves as a grim reminder that power and trust, when abused, can lead to devastating consequences. But amidst the focus on Karen's betrayal, we must not forget the true victim, Richard Hill. A husband, a friend, a man whose life was taken far too soon. His memory remains a solemn call for justice, not just in the courtroom, but in the way we treat those we love and trust. What do you think drove Karen Hill to such extremes? Was it desperation, greed, or something darker still? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice keeps these discussions alive. If you found this case compelling, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Horror and Crime. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss another chilling story from our Real Life Crime Chronicles playlist. Next time, we bring you the story of a wedding that ended in bloodshed, love, betrayal, and murder intertwined in Red Wedding, the CEO's last dance. A tale that will leave you questioning just how far jealousy can go. See you there.